Hello, everybody. My name is Gilda Ross. I am the Glenbard Student and Community Projects Coordinator, and I'm welcoming you here today to the Glenbard Parents Series event. We've got some good questions lined up for you, everybody. And if you have a question, please come to the Q&A box and let us know what you're thinking. So this afternoon, we had a great program with Matt, and he is back again for a 7 p.m. program. Some counselors, some teachers, some school personnel I contacted me today and let me know how useful that was. And I know we'll be hearing from our parents this evening about the importance and the value of tonight's program. Before we start, I would like to go over some notes to let you know that coming up next on May 4th and 5th, it will be our last GPS event of this school year. Jessica Leahy, some of you may be familiar with Jessica. She's the author of the best-selling book, The Gift of Failure. And she has a brand new book that is just out called The Addiction Inoculation. And we are very excited that she's going to be with us to kick off her book tour. Jessica writes very honestly in her book about her own challenges with addiction. And her mission to write this book was to spare her own teenage sons some of the challenges that have been an issue for her family for many years. So I think we have a lot to learn. She will also be doing 2 presentations. There will be one at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, May 4th, and then another very similar program, noon on Wednesday, May 5th. So I hope you will all be back. I always like to mention that your homework for this evening is to please, please, please like us on Facebook, go to our Instagram and share the resource because everyone is always welcome. All of our sponsors who help support the Glenbard Parents Series, they have let us know that all parents, all caregivers, all students are welcome regardless of where your child goes to school. So please come back. For almost 2 decades, Dr. Matt Dewar has served as a coach, an educator, and well-being coordinator at Lake Forest High School, introducing students, athletes, and college to research-based mindfulness and self-care practices through workshops, academic courses, school-wide programs, and professional development. Outside of Lake Forest High School, Matt has worked with collegiate and professional athletes and consulted with school districts nationally on implementing mindfulness and well-being programming. Matt is also the former president of the Coalition of Schools Educating Mindfully. You just saw Tracy Heilers, who is the coordinator, the brains behind the organization. And we're so grateful to you, Tracy, and the organization for your support of this important program. We're very excited, and I know Matt is as well. He is the author of a brand new book coming out, the Mindful Breathing Workbook for Teens, an Education and Well-Being, an Ontological Inquiry that was published in 2016. His work has been featured on TEDx, NPR, and the National Wellness Institute. We are in for a really important evening, and I'm so glad you're here. Matt, take it away.
Thank you, Gilda, for having me. As I told the noon group, Gilda and I have been back and forth, communicating back and forth for over a year. So it's so awesome to see this finally come to fruition. And I also need to second what Gilda was saying about Tracy Heilers and the Coalition of Schools Educating Mindfully. Tracy is an amazing human being, and it's an amazing organization. And if you want to learn more about it, go to educatingmindfully.org and get involved in some kind of way. Anyways, we will start tonight's presentation. Let me share my screen with all of you. Here we are. Let me minimize that. All right. I know as a teacher who has spent a great deal of time on Zoom and Google Meets over the last year, I can appreciate the Zoom brain melt that is becoming increasingly common. So the fact that you're all here this evening at 7 o'clock at night is huge. And I really appreciate that you're taking the time to join us and be a part of this dialogue. Tonight, we're going to talk about mindfully how to mindfully breathe stress into strength. And to start tonight's presentation, we're going to jump in the deep end. And we're going to put into practice what this presentation is about. We're going to start with personal experience. So if wherever you are, if you could put your feet flat on the floor, adjust your posture in your chair, and sit in an upright posture that is attentive but not tense. And all that means is that your shoulders are over your hips and your ears are over your shoulders. And you can take your hands and put them wherever they're going to be still. So you can fold them together. You can put them on the tops of your thighs, whatever's comfortable, just as long as they're not fidgeting. And then I invite you to close your mouth and breathe through your nose. And then last, if you're comfortable doing so, you can close your eyes. Or if you're not comfortable closing your eyes, you can just gently shift your gaze downward at about a 45-degree angle. And I want you to take 10 seconds here. And just allow your attention to slowly connect with your breath. Just with the sensation of your body as a whole. And there's no need to judge anything. There's no need to change anything. All we're doing is watching. That's it. Just simply noticing. And if you notice that your mind or your attention is very scattered right now, and it's hard to pay attention to your breath, and it's hard to notice the sensation of your body as a whole, I invite you to put a hand on your chest and a hand on your belly. And this can give you a more tactile sense of your breathing and of your body. And now I just want you to take a moment and on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being your stress bucket is totally full. One more drop will make it spill over. 0 being you are unconscious and asleep, which hopefully is not the case at this point. It's too early for that in the presentation. And 5 is calm but alert. I want you to take a moment and just simply give yourself a score. And I'm not going to grade you on this, just your own intuitive sense. What's it like to be in your body right now on a scale of 0 to 10? 10 being stress bucket is totally full. 0 being you're asleep. 5 being calm and alert. Okay, now put that score to the side in your mind and just come back to your breathing. And I want you to take 15 to 20 seconds and just try to develop a curiosity for your breathing. Are you breathing fast or slow? Are you breathing shallow or deep? Are you breathing heavy or light? Are you breathing effortlessly? Or is there a sense of effort, of trying? And again, there's no right or wrong here. Just simply notice whatever's presenting itself through your breathing. And just continue to breathe. Just let your breath breathe itself. All you need to do is just get out of the way. And now for another minute or two, if you notice that you're still a little bit edgy, a little bit anxious, a little bit scattered, and you'd like to take the edge off of that, I invite you to slow your breathing down. And one really easy way to do that is to breathe in and out of your nose so slowly that you cannot hear yourself breathing. So you're silently breathing in and silently breathing out. And I'm going to give you a minute here where I'm not going to say a word. I'm just going to allow you to be with your breath. And if your mind wanders off, which it almost certainly will do, just simply notice that and come back. Notice your breath, notice your body. If you have to do that 10 times in the next minute, it's totally okay. And if your mind is drifted off, just gently bring your attention back. Consciously feel your breath. Consciously feel into your body as a whole. Even take a moment and appreciate everything going on around you in your immediate environment. And on the count of 3, I'm going to ask you to take a long, slow breath in through your nose. You're going to do that till you fill up all the way and you can't get any more air in. And then you're going to hold it. And I'm going to count to 10. And then you're going to slowly exhale through your mouth. Very gently, like you're blowing on a candle flame, but you're blowing so gently you don't blow the flame out. We're going to do that 2 times in a row. And if you want to add some imagery to that, if you're someone who enjoys imagery, you can just imagine as you're breathing in that you're drawing in a particular emotional quality that you would like to feel more of. And when we get to the breath hold, you can just allow that quality to just soak into your being, into your body. And then when we slowly exhale through the mouth, you can just imagine releasing and letting go of any negativity or any emotional weight that you're just looking to let go of. So 1, 2, 3, slowly breathe in through your nose. And keep going till you fill up all the way. Don't need to be forceful. And then once you're full, hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Slowly exhale through your mouth. As you exhale, allow your body to soften and sink a little bit. If you notice any tension anywhere, just let it go. And then one more time. 1, 2, 3. Slowly breathe in through your nose. Fill up all the way. Once you're full, hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Slowly exhale through your mouth. Allow your body and your muscles to soften. Let go of any baggage that you need to get rid of. If your hands are on your chest and your stomach, your belly, you can put them down. You can start to wiggle your toes. You can wiggle your fingers. You can gently roll your shoulders backward and forward. Stretch your head side to side. Basically, any movement that is gentle, thoughtful, restorative. Just do whatever your body's telling you to do. And before we transition out of this exercise, I want to return to that scale of, or that continuum of 0 to 10. And I want you to give yourself a new number. I want you to rate yourself again and potentially give yourself a new number. So right now, in this moment, inside your own body, on a scale of 0 to 10, where is your body showing up right here, right now, in this moment? And now take that score and compare it to that first score. I'll use my own experience as an example. When we started this, I was probably at a 7, maybe even a 7.5, right? And I knew that because I had a little tightness in my chest. My stomach was tight. My shoulders were tight. The right side of my jaw was tight. And my exhalations were not full. I was ending my exhalations early. I was feeling like I needed to get air, which is common when I'm a little bit elevated. I don't let my exhalations go all the way. Now in this moment, I would say I'm at a 4, maybe even a 3. I feel very calm right now. And so the point is, and what we're going to explore here is there's something transformative that happens when we're still, when we're quiet, and when we consciously breathe, when we mindfully breathe, that we have an ability to become aware of and skillfully shift our internal state. And if we make a practice of this mindful breathing, we might find that we live richer, more fulfilling, more resilient emotional lives. So let's get going. I want to start with a little perspective here. In theater, they talk about the fourth wall and breaking the fourth wall. The fourth wall is the invisible wall between the characters on stage and the audience and the crowd. And when a character theater breaks the fourth wall, or in film, or in literature, really. They're almost admitting to the fictional nature of the play, right? And so I want to break the fourth wall. I'm up here on stage. I'm the quote unquote expert presenting on mindful breathing. And I want to get this out there right away, the fiction that I'm an expert and that somehow I have all of this figured out. And you don't. And that's why you're here, because I have all the answers. This is an early version of my dysregulated, anxious self. So even as a young person, I was prone to emotional dysregulation. And here you notice the cookie in the left hand. That is a peace offering from my mother so that she could take my picture. I apparently was not a fan of pictures. And so the cookie was an attempt to manipulate me into getting my picture taken. Gotta love those overalls. Those are slick. And now as an adult, I still struggle with stress and anxiety, which is why I do the work that I do. And our resident 13-year-old, Max, who I like to call the CEO, stresses me out. And I'm sure if you have children at home, they stress you out. You love them very much, but they stress you out. And the CEO here, I don't remember filling out the application to work for him, but I did at some point. And working for him is a very stressful job. And he calls me the no machine because I say no all the time, or he calls me the fun sponge. So I don't have everything figured out. And this is Winnie and Moose. Moose actually is on the left, Winnie's on the right. And they seem like they would be lovely dogs to have around. Very cute. Look how cute they are. They take naps together. They play together, but they stress me out. Even my dogs stress me out. This is Winnie, right when she got home from the groomers. Wherever there's mud, she finds it. And here's Moose every morning in my face, panting, breathing very heavily. He needs to take a course in mindful breathing because he is breathing heavily all the time, typically with a bone or a tennis ball in his mouth. And here's the red rug. When people at home see me vacuuming this rug, they know, stay away. This is something I tend to I'm unconsciously driven to do when I get stressed out, is vacuum. And sure enough, 30 minutes later, this is often what the rug looks like. The dogs see that I'm vacuuming, I'm cleaning things up, and they say, oh, it's time to go roll all over it again and get our fur all over it. So here's the spoiler alert. I have a black belt in stress and anxiety, and it's been earned over a lifetime of finding all sorts of ingenious ways to unnecessarily make myself anxious. So now that we've broken the fourth wall and you know where I'm coming from, I want you to imagine standing in front of two doors. The door on the left is a life of resilience, growth, and well-being. And behind door number two is a life of an abundance of avoidable and unnecessary suffering. And I want you to raise your hand. I always say this to my students, raise your hand if you ever wake up in the morning and you consciously say to yourself, I want to live the life behind door number two. I want to live a life characterized by an abundance of unnecessary and avoidable suffering. And they look at me like I'm asking a dumb question, because guess what? I'm asking a dumb question. No one wants to do that. No one wants to live a life characterized by an abundance of avoidable and unnecessary suffering. And yet, apparently not wanting to be behind door number two isn't enough. Because too many of us in today's world spend a lot of time, or too much time, more time than we would like, behind door number two. The CDC, about 7 or 8 years ago, discovered that In the United States, we were the only first world country with a declining life expectancy, and they couldn't figure out why this was happening. So they put together a team of researchers, and what they found is that people in middle age were dying at an unprecedented rate, or an accelerated rate. And they were dying from 3 statistical categories: deaths related to alcohol use, deaths related to drug use, 2/3 of which were opioid related, and then ultimately deaths related to suicide, which from 1999 to 2017 increased 34% in the United States, ages 12 and up. And so there's actually a Dartmouth economist who last year calculated, David Blanchflower is his name. He calculated the age of peak unhappiness, right? So what would you guess is the age of peak unhappiness? Just think in your own head, what would that be? And he found that it was between 47.1 years old and 48.1 years old. And this is an important correlation with diseases of despair, because in a time of life where people are least happy and most stressed out, they're turning to things, unskillful things, to self-regulate, and they're paying the price. And this is really important. And this is one of the few things from tonight's presentation that I want you to walk away with and really appreciate. Our worst habits are unskillful attempts to self-regulate. Or another way of saying this, our worst habits are unskillful attempts to manage stress. And so when we start talking about mindful breathing and we start thinking about mindful breathing as a way of transforming stress into strength or stress into resilience, we have to be able to distinguish inside out strategies for managing stress versus outside in. And we live in a culture where it's become the norm to lean in times of stress on outside in strategies. And we see this play out every morning, and we see this play out every evening, that in the morning we lack energy, and so we lean on caffeine, an outside in strategy to elevate our state, to bring us up to that 5 on that continuum. And every evening when we're tired and wired and we should be sleepy, we should be ready to go to bed, but we can't shut off our minds and we feel anxious. And so what do? We lean on depressants like alcohol. And so we're constantly leaning on outside in strategies. And so what we want to do for our own emotional well-being and for our children's own emotional well-being, and we'll talk more about that in a second, is we want to develop inside out strategies like mindful breathing, a skill-based strategy. Because when we use alcohol or we use caffeine to modulate our state, we're no more, in the future, we will be no more prepared to skillfully deal with stress. But when we learn to mindfully breathe, we're building a skill and we'll be able to manage stress more effectively in the present as well as over time. And so this is something we need to appreciate. Adults teach emotional skill and resilience through how they respond to stress. And so when we lean on outside in strategies all the time, this is instructive. Young adults and children, but especially young adults, they see how we are. They see what we do all the time. We know this. We walk into our homes and we're stressed out and maybe we try to fake it. And if we live with young adults, immediately they know what's up, what's going on. As a teacher, I get this all the time in class. I typically am an energetic, upbeat teacher when I come into class, and some days I'm not, but I try to hide it. I try to cover it up. Sure enough, every single time, student will raise their hand. What's up, Mr. D? What's up? What's going on? Something's weird. Are you okay? What's going on? So they're attuned to us. They're very much attuned to us. And so we need to develop emotional intelligence and skill in the face of stress, especially in the face of stress. If we're going to steer ourselves away from a door number 2 existence, if we're going to steer ourselves away from avoidable and unnecessary suffering, we need to develop emotional intelligence and skill. And so when we talk about emotional intelligence, the core skills are self-awareness and self-regulation. This is fancy education and psychology speak. All this means self-awareness is what you just did in that breathing activity. Self-awareness is just taking a moment to pay attention to your internal state, to notice how full is my stress bucket in this moment. How is my body and breath communicating to me in real time about where my physiology is at? That's self-awareness. That's it. And self-regulation then is the next step. What is it that I need to do to manage and regulate my state when it starts shifting into areas that put me into, that drive maladaptive behaviors, that drive bad habits, unhelpful actions, right? And so we become aware of our internal state and we develop inside out skills to help manage our internal state. This is like the most important life skill. And so this is where mindful breathing comes in. There are so many different strategies for self-regulating, for developing self-awareness and for developing the ability to skillfully self-regulate. But I think mindful breathing, and this is why I've spent so much time learning about it, researching it, and teaching it, is it's really unique. It's unique because it's always available and accessible. As I say to students when we start mindful breathing exercises at the beginning of class, did you forget your breathing at your last class or in your locker or down in the cafeteria or at home? No, your breath is always with you. So you don't need to go to a health club, or you don't need to have a place to exercise, or none of those things. The breath is always here now. Breathing is very easy to learn, very easy to learn. And there's a reason why as human beings, we've developed this ability to consciously learn adaptive breathing patterns. Nothing else on the planet can do this. We are the only things that can consciously take a hold of an automatic process and interact directly with our physiology. So this is a really important skill that has been selected over the course of human development and evolution, is this ability to consciously breathe. And we have this because it helps us act more skillfully on our internal environment and also on our external environment. And here's the best part. It's free. You don't have to pay anything to do it. It's always accessible, easy to learn, directly interfaces with our physiology and emotions, and it's free. So it's a win-win all the way around. As I'm sure you all know, there are so many methods for breathing, and breathing is such a hot topic right now, which is great. It's finally reaching kind of the red hot center of public attention and awareness, which is good. But people often feel overwhelmed with all the different breathing techniques. Should I breathe like that? Should I breathe like this? Should I do this method or that method? So in this presentation, because we don't have a ton of time, the methods are many, but the principles are few. So let's focus on principles. And if you just take this away tonight, you'll walk away with 80 to 90% of what you need to know. And that's take time to be still, to be quiet, and to consciously pay or mindfully pay attention to your breathing. Jose Herrera and his team of researchers 2 years ago looked at the effect on the brain of what they called volitional respiration, conscious breathing. So not breathing in any particular pattern, just subjects stopping and consciously paying attention to their breathing, not manipulating it in any way. And they could watch in real time the activity of the brain reorganize itself in what's called top-down regulation, that's psychology speak for an emotionally regulated state. So just by being still and quiet and paying attention to our breathing, you're regulating and learning to control your internal state. And so let's look at mindful breathing for self-awareness. This is what we just did at the beginning. This is Dan Siegel's work. This is called the window of tolerance. So we put I do this with my classes at the beginning of almost every class. I teach this construct at the beginning of the school year. And so I say at the beginning of class, all right, let's be still, let's be quiet, take a moment. And it's a scale of 0 to 10. Where are you? Are you in the red? Are you in the blue? Are you in the sweet spot in the middle, the zone of regulation, the window of tolerance, where you feel most clear, where you feel like you have access to the better parts of your nature, right? And so we can observe our breathing and allow our breathing to tell us where we're at. So often if a student says, I'm at a 6 today, I'll say, okay, well, how do you know you're at a 6? And at first, at the beginning of the school year, they struggle with that. They're like, well, I just know I'm at a 6. But in time, they start to realize that they're basing that assessment on their breathing, on the sensations surrounding their breathing, on the quality of the breath. So our breathing is this tool that we can develop and learn to pay attention to that helps us build self-awareness. One activity that you can do at home is just a 1-minute breath count. Time how many breath cycles occur in 1 minute, and do it with your family. Compare your scores, right? And this is just a good way of building self-awareness as well, because it shows how hard is your engine working, so to speak. If you're breathing a lot, that means there's some ambient stress being processed in your physiology. So your breathing is elevated. Your breathing is your first line of defense against stress. So if you're breathing quickly, that's often correlated with elevated levels of stress. And so the research kind of suggests, generally speaking, right, this isn't a perfect science, that 12 to 20 seconds is pretty normal. 21 to 25 seconds is a bit elevated, and above 25 seconds consistently is potentially problematic. Maybe because of fitness issues, maybe because of asthma, or maybe because of chronic stress. Below 12 is, the lower we go below 12, the more we start creating a calming, sedating effect in the nervous system. So a tool you can use at home for yourself and with your family is just time your breathing and then create an exercise. So say you breathe 19 times per minute, then try breathing for 1 to 5 minutes, cutting that breath count by 50%. So breathe 10 seconds per minute. So whatever your total was the first time, cut it in half. Again, reassess your state on that continuum. What kind of effect did that have? This is a really, really important test. It's a bit technical, and I can't get into all the nuances of it tonight. I could do a whole 3-hour seminar on just the importance of carbon dioxide in terms of mindful breathing and respiratory physiology, et cetera, but we won't do that. With the carbon dioxide test, I'm gonna cut it short because I want to be able to leave time for questions here at the end. I've got about 12 minutes. But with a CO2 test, what you do is and this is written in the workbook that's coming out this summer, my workbook, the whole test is written out. But what you're going to do is just close your mouth, breathe through your nose normally for 30 seconds to a minute. And that's just regulating your breathing. And then at some point with your cell phone and your stopwatch out, after a normal exhalation, the air is going to leave your nose. You're going to pinch your nose, hold your breath, and hit start on your stopwatch. And you're going to time how long it takes for your breathing reflex, your air hunger reflex to kick in. And then you're going to hit stop. It isn't a total or absolute breath hold. You're not going to see how long you can hold your breath. So one of the ways you know that you did it correctly is if after you stop the stopwatch and let go of your nose and take your first breath, you just go back to breathing normally. If you have to take a huge breath, you likely held your breath too long. And so what this test shows is how tolerant you are to carbon dioxide. And why is carbon dioxide significant? It's significant because it's kind of the metabolic stress messenger of the body. That as you become more stressed out, you produce more carbon dioxide. And typically what happens is that when people have chronic stress, they end up breathing through their mouths a lot, and they offload a lot of carbon dioxide, which makes their ability to tolerate carbon dioxide go down. And we know through research that people with PTSD, people with panic disorder, people with separation anxiety, etc., when they breathe in air that's infused with higher levels of carbon dioxide, they'll immediately go into panic attacks, because the mechanisms for regulating CO2 in the body, the chemoreceptors is what they're called, they're dysregulated. And they've actually done studies with troops before deployment, looking at their carbon dioxide tolerance to elevated levels that they breathe in, gauging their responses, and it's predictive of post-deployment post-traumatic stress disorder, right? So carbon dioxide plays a huge role in how we respond to stress and how vulnerable we are to being stressed. So this is a really important test. It is rather technical for the time constraints that we have, but here are the scores. 0 to 10 seconds means high stress. So your air hunger reflex noticeably kicked in within 10 seconds, right? Suggests high levels of stress. Now you need to do this test a number of times to have accurate scores. 10 to 20 seconds, elevated stress. 20 to 30 seconds, it's relatively normal. 30 to 40 seconds, elevated capacity, meaning you're pretty healthy. Usually at school, cross-country runners and swimmers typically will go into the 30s and 40s, and that's just because their bodies are used to regulating carbon dioxide because of their aerobic capacity. And then above 40 seconds is someone who trains breath work. I will say this, I've worked with hundreds of students and athletes, and anytime consistently I've had someone who gets under 5 seconds, there's always a serious emotional issue going on, trauma or something. And it becomes, doing this test becomes a wonderful way of connecting these young adults with mental health supports. That and working with college athletes, it's happened a number of times where a particular athlete has never had exposure to mental health supports and resources. And they've got this ongoing stuff going on in their life. And I'm able to identify that and pinpoint it by how they're breathing, by their carbon dioxide tolerance. So it's a very useful test. I also use it in a freshman class, Wellness for Life, that I sometimes teach. And it can be a great way of getting a kid freshman year connected with social workers in the building instead of waiting till junior year when their issues have snowballed into something much larger. Bigger topic for another time. I'll proceed. We'll just keep going. Lateral rib movement. This is just a breathing exercise to look at your mechanics, right? Your posture and your rib cage are so important to breathing efficiently. And it's because your diaphragm muscle, your breathing muscle, the muscle when you consciously take a hold of your breathing, if I ask you to hold your breath right now, or to breathe faster or slower, or take a big breath in, that's because you're consciously controlling your diaphragm muscle that attaches to your rib cage. And so the more mobility your ribs have laterally, the more efficiently your diaphragm muscle works. And you have a nerve from your diaphragm to your brain called the phrenic nerve. And the root of phrenic comes from the Greek. It means mind, which is the people who named the nerve were very astute, because how we breathe and how we control the diaphragm sends important self-regulating information to the brain. Right? And so if our ribs are pinned down because of bad posture, and we see this with young adults all the time, they're hunched over, their rib cage is closed, and their diaphragm can't expand and contract fully. So now they're breathing faster in a more labored way. And now they're offloading more carbon dioxide, right? And now they're more emotionally dysregulated. And so it snowballs. So just a simple exercise is just to take your hands like this and put them on your lower ribs with your thumbs in the back of your ribs and your hands around your sides. Relax your shoulders. Just for 1 minute, consciously breathe into the space between your hands. And just simply notice, are your ribs moving laterally? And what you might notice is that you have a lot of vertical movement, that when you breathe, the body moves vertically instead of laterally, horizontally. What you want for efficient breathing is that lateral movement, and that comes with the ribs, right? So this is just a useful exercise that you can practice at home with your kids. Make it a game. I have up here in my office, I have foam rollers and yoga wheels and lacrosse balls and all sorts of things to work on the thoracic spine, to open up the rib cage. And Max will come in and we'll do mobility stuff on our backs together. He'll just start rolling on a foam roller and we'll be talking, right? So you can make this a part of the culture of your family. Nasal breathing, gotta love the picture. Nasal breathing is another breathing behavior or a mechanical piece of breathing that's really important. Noticing if you mouth breathe all the time is kind of your default. Do you breathe a lot through your nose? I'll tell you this, in the past 10 years, the most significant thing I've done for my health and well-being, and it was through a breathing certification that I did. We had to tape our mouths shut at night. Yes, I'm not making this up. Check with your doctor first. For the breathing certification, we had to 3M micropore tape. We had to tape our mouths shut while we slept. And I had gotten sleep tests for sleep apnea, and I was having apneas. I would have 2 or 3 sinus infections a year for years. And within 1 week of taping my mouth, while I slept at night, I could wake up and breathe perfectly through my nose. I never have sleep apnea anymore. And I never have, very rarely do I have daytime fatigue. I would be so like fall on my face tired. And I'm in good shape. I run, I exercise, everything. And it was just so abnormal that I was always as tired as I was. And it was because all night I'm breathing with my mouth open, offloading carbon dioxide, not breathing through my nose, allowing my sinuses to get congested. And it was just a vicious cycle. So looking at practicing good breathing habits, breathing through your nose. And again, check with your doctor before you do any taping of your mouth. Then we have, so those are all ways of mindful breathing for self-awareness. Then we have just basic mindful breathing for self-regulation, right? Basic breathing dials, I call it. And that's one dial is your inhalation. So when you inhale, you're activating the sympathetic nervous system, which increases alertness. And when you exhale, you're deactivating the sympathetic nervous system, and that increases calm. So all this means, this is a very simple dial. Which state do you want to turn up? If you're tired, breathe in a way that emphasizes inhalations, because that's activating the sympathetic nervous system, increasing alertness, moving you up that continuum of 0 to 10. If you want calm and you want to bring yourself down, regulate yourself down, then you emphasize the exhale, right? A really known cadence is to exhale twice as long as you inhale. Very, very simple. You don't have to make this complicated. So if you're stressed out, all you need to do is breathe slowly, breathe lightly, and extend exhalations. It's it. I know there's a million different teachers of breathing who have special techniques. It's all great, but really, you're going to get the most bang for your buck doing the most simple things. It's really simple when you break it down. This is an exercise that we don't have enough time to do, but it's called the ladder. And just for 2 minutes, breathe through the nose with hands on ribs. And you go 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out, 3 seconds in, 4 seconds out. And basically you just keep going like climbing a ladder with your exhalations. Each round, your exhalation gets 1 second longer, 1 second longer. And you keep going until you kind of hit a wall. And then you scale back. You can either start over or you can just go back to where it was comfortable and just maintain there. So this is an exercise we do here at home before bed, sometimes with Max. And we also do this, I do this in the classroom with students. Okay, so let's take a step back, get some perspective. I'm throwing a ton of information at you. And as my students often tell me, you're going to make my head explode. Slow down, Mr. Dewar. I like to use this analogy, flying by instrument. And if anyone's familiar with flying planes and being a pilot, flying by instrument means you have a higher level of expertise in terms of being a pilot, because you don't visually, you don't need to see in order to safely fly the plane. You can use the instruments and dials within the plane to successfully fly the plane. Mindful breathing is flying by instrument. That sometimes we're in the cockpit of our lives and we can no longer see clearly. Emotional fog and emotional stormy weather sets in and we can't see anything. We're totally dysregulated. But no matter how foggy things get or hard to see, we always have this breath. It's always clear. It's always here. It's always happening. And so when we can start to bring our awareness to our breathing, it's like learning to fly by instrument. We can safely navigate stormy emotional weather by just learning to develop our self-awareness and self-regulation through mindful breathing, which brings us back to these two doors, right? Mindful breathing allows us to spend more time behind door number 1 and less time behind door number 2. And there's nothing more important in life than that, right? And again, I want to repeat that not wanting to be behind door number 2 is not enough, because again, no one wants to be behind door number 2. No one makes that their conscious goal. Yet, statistically speaking, more and more of us are ending up behind door number 2, right? We need that emotional skill, and mindful breathing can be that skill. So as you take this into your own homes, an essential question to ask is, am I a regulating presence? And one way to gauge this is, can you be alone, quiet, and still, and just breathe? Is that an experience you can enter into relatively easily, right? Because when you do that, you confront the conditioning of your own nervous system. And if you can't do that, if your internal world is so chaotic, that is going to be communicated to those around you. So that's where your practice begins, is learning how to ease into that space of stillness and quiet and conscious, mindful breathing. Because when you can be regulated and calm in that space, you can start to channel that and use that as a way of being with other people around you in your home. So create a mindful breathing family culture. And this is something I've tried to do in this house, right? There's Max. We try to ride down to Lake Michigan often and watch the sunrise. And in the summer, we get in the water. And sometimes we'll sit on the beach and we'll just do a breathing exercise together. And so I don't know how many other 13-year-olds are waking up, throughout the year very early to walk or ride a bike to the beach to breathe and watch the sunrise. This is his room. I'll pull that black chair by his bed, excuse me, when he's going to bed. And when he's going to bed, we'll breathe together. And sometimes Katie, my wife, will also join. And the three of us will just quietly breathe. And the lights are off. Max will breathe. Sometimes it goes 10 minutes. Sometimes it's 1 minute. And at some point he'll say, okay, I'm good. And then we'll exchange our good nights and everything. And then we go to bed. But we're making breathing and we're making stillness and quiet something we do together. Adults teach emotional skill and resilience through how they respond to stress. This is so important. And so in any situation, the person of influence establishes the emotional tone and climate. And you're a person of influence in your own home. What kind of emotional tone and climate are you establishing? And is mindful breathing a tool that you can start to use to establish a positive emotional tone and climate. And so how we are is more influential than what we say. This is one of the hardest things about being a coach, a teacher, and a parent, right? This is an inconvenient truth. How we are is more influential than what we say. And we know this, especially as our kids become young adults. They call our BS all the time, right? So how we are is so, so important. So mindfully breathing together is an opportunity to co-regulate and connect. I'm going to skip this part because we're running out of time. Actually, this is an important part. I always tell people, if you forget everything, remember this one line. If I can breathe, I can choose. I can choose my response. I can choose door number 1 instead of reacting mindlessly and ending up behind door number 2. So whenever I notice that I'm moving up on that continuum and I'm about to enter a very reactive emotional space, if I can just bring my awareness to my breathing and just consciously breathe, I can choose who I am and what I do. And I can ultimately choose door number 1. And so I just quickly want to read a passage at the beginning of the workbook. My workbook. Co-regulation has become a buzzword in education and mental health. It refers to how your self-awareness and self-care skills synchronize with the emotional habits of the children and young adults you care for and oversee. The implications of this are significant. You teach and parent more with who and how you are than with the content of what you say. Emotions are much, much older than words. And whether we like it or not, our young adults' inner lives set sail to our own emotional ebbs and flows. What this means is that we must do our own self-awareness and self-care work alongside our young adults and children. When they see us doing this work, they become aware of the possibility that the work can be done, that a healthy and stable emotional life is possible with practice. Just as importantly, they become aware through your choice to personally value and prioritize self-care that it's significant and worth the commitment. I can't think of anything more instructive than demonstrating to young adults the capacity to struggle, adapt, and evolve toward greater emotional intelligence and freedom. And this is what mindful breathing can do for you and for your family. So if we want emotionally skilled young adults, we have to practice and model emotional skill ourselves. Here's my contact information. If you want to reach out, feel free to connect with me on Instagram at Dr. Matt Dewar or on LinkedIn. You can send me a message through my website. I'll stop sharing my screen here. And here we are. Gilda, how you doing?
Doing good. This is my sentence, my takeaway from this afternoon. I love when you said, our young adults are living in a world that we, the adults, created. I like to tell that to students. You didn't make this craziness. We did this to you. And I love when you said that. Our young adults are living in a world we, the adults, created. And when we learn how to instill our own calmness, then that will give us the space to best respond to them. And that's my takeaway. We got a couple of questions. Okay, so let's hear from Valeria. You're up first.
Hi, I'm Valeria. My question is, Dr. Dewar, do you have some techniques that I can use for test anxiety before a high stakes exam or like a final exam?
This is an amazing question. And every year, my services are frequently sought out within my own school by teachers who have teachers who teach AP classes. And so AP testing seems to just wreak havoc on students' emotional lives and well-being. And so I often lead sessions before and during AP testing. Yes. So the quick answer to your question is before you start testing, just take a moment, just as we did this evening, to be still, to be quiet, and to bring your attention inward, and just simply notice your breathing. And notice if you're holding your breathing. One of the things that happens when we get stressed out is there's this instinct to try to control our breathing. And we sometimes hold our breathing, literally we'll hold our breath, or we become very shallow on the exhalation. And so one of the things you can do before a test is just take a moment to practice self-awareness and notice, am I allowing my breath to just breathe itself? And then next, am I allowing my exhalations to just fully roll out? Because when we don't do that, then we have this kind of panic reactive inhalation that just drives this process of overbreathing. So that's number one. And then number two is once you kind of just regulate your breathing by paying attention to it, is just slow your breathing down. Just take within a minute or two, if you just slow your breathing down, breathe through your nose, slow your breathing down, you can really take the edge off of anxiety and keep that frontal lobe online that you need for academic performance. So it's a really good question. So in summary, pay attention to your breathing and then just consciously slow it down. Thank you. Good question.
I also have another question.
Please. Yes.
So my other question is, I know so many students are feeling overwhelmed right now and just stressed out these days. And I know some of my friends are having trouble with calming their brains down in order to get good sleep. What suggestions do you have for us?
Another outstanding question that's very similar to the testing question. And a number of my students now have deliberate, because of me constantly telling them to do this because they complain that they don't get good sleep, is you really have to work on a deliberate transition between the activities of the day and going to bed. You can't take the chaos of the day and just go, 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 and then hit the brake and think you're magically then just going to jump into restorative sleep. So you need to create a space. And for everyone, it's different. So for some people, it can be 5 minutes. Some it's 10, some it's 30 minutes. For me, it's an hour. I need about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour to just shut everything off and allow myself to transition into bed. And during that transition, it's a wonderful opportunity to practice mindful breathing. And so again, breathing very slowly, consciously paying attention to your breathing, and then slowing your breathing down can be a really valuable tool for falling asleep. One particular breathing cadence that seems to work a lot is a 1-4-2. Now, with some students who have a poor tolerance to carbon dioxide, this actually makes them a little panicked. So if you're someone who has asthma or you tend to be prone to panic, this probably isn't a good exercise, but for everyone else, it's very calming. So let's say you breathe in for a 3 count, then you would hold your breath for 12. Then you would exhale for 6. So it's a 1-4-2 ratio. So if you breathe in for 4, then you would hold your breath for 16 and then exhale for 8. If you do that even 5 times, you're going to start getting very sleepy. And then the last resort is just count your exhalations. Try to count your exhalations until like 50. And I guarantee you'll fall asleep before you get to 50. Right? So there's something that puts your mind at ease. You're giving your mind a task just to count exhalations, and just being with the breath is soothing and calming. And then counting gives that focus. And then at some point you'll just nod off.
Good. Thank you so much. Thank you. Why is this so hard? Why is paying attention so hard?
That's the ultimate question, because we live in an environment that's engineered for us to be perpetually distracted, because our state of distraction is very profitable. The behaviors that result from being perpetually distracted are easily exploited for other people's financial gain. And that's social media, that's YouTube, that's everything. And so the more distracted we are, the more reactive we are in our behavior, and the more predictable we become, and the more we start leaning on things that aren't healthy. And so if we're going with the flow, we're going somewhere we don't want to go. I mean, that's the unfortunate thing. Ideally, we would live in a society where the easiest thing to do is the best thing for us. But we don't live in that society. We live in a society where, in fact, the easiest thing to do is typically really not good for us. And that's in every aspect of life, from movement to diet to attention, etc. So to be well in the world that we live in does take some initial effort and some really important value-based decisions.
And it's really work we should practice, not when we're stressed, but when we're relaxed too, right?
Let me get to that real quick, because I always say this to students, like if we have athletes, I'll say, would you ever just not practice all week and just show up to a game? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, when you don't practice emotion regulation skills, and then once you get stressed out, you try to employ those skills and they don't work right away. Like, of course they don't, because you're not practicing them. So in the same way you have basketball practice all week for the game. It's the same thing with stress. You need to practice these skills in a regulated state so that when you become dysregulated, you still have access to them.
Got it. My last question. You know, for our recent Live Life Well week at Glenbard, we told students, we had posters up about ignite your superpowers. And the superpowers were kindness, gratitude, and mindfulness. And we struggled a little bit with a definition for mindfulness. I'd like to end. What is your definition of mindfulness, Matt?
Mindfulness comes from a root word in the Pali, in Sanskrit, it's smrti, and it means to remember. And so what mindfulness is like you just asked about distraction. It's an inherent human tendency to be distracted and to drift away from ourselves. And so mindfulness is the process and practice of remembering to come back to the present moment. And that's why breathing is so important, because it doesn't matter how far into the future our thoughts are reaching or how stuck in the past our emotions become. The breath is always unfolding right here, right now. It's always calling us back home to the present moment. And so when we can remember to come back to the breath, come back to the moment, come back to the best version of ourselves, that is mindfulness, in my opinion.
Another takeaway. Thank you so much. We finally did it. We got you here. I'm so excited. Thank you. And we definitely will have you back. So thank you so much, Matt. Really appreciate your sharing all this important information. And everyone, thank you. Share this resource of the Glenbard Parent Series. And we will see you hopefully for our final program of the year, May 4th and 5th, where we welcome Jessica Leahy, Addiction Inoculation. Everybody stay safe. Have a great evening. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.